Hi guys, I'm Shmee. Hello, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to a beautiful day in Germany with a rather beautiful car as well, if I may say so myself. The latest arrival in the garage, the Ferrari GTC4Lusso. Now today I'm going to take you guys along for a complete induction tour of the new car. We're going to go through all of the ins and outs. I'm going to tell you some of the small things that I've learnt about it so far from my 500 miles or so of driving since I picked it up. We're also later on going to touch on some of the little niggles that I've discovered as well. Basically, this is going to be everything that an owner of one of these could need to know about their car. We're going to touch on the inside, the outside, go into the engine bay, check out the boot, go through some of the electronics, the technology and the switches, basically all of it in detail. So let's get started then with the Ferrari GTC4Lusso. The Lusso is now the second car that I've owned that was built in Maranello, Italy, the second Ferrari Schmeemobile after its predecessor, the FF. I picked this car up about a week or two ago from Bramley Motor Cars in the UK. Then almost immediately, we loaded it alongside 5 of the other cars from the garage into one very big truck to bring them over to the Netherlands to be on display at the Amsterdam Motor Show to meet with many of you. The Netherlands is actually one of the top 5 countries in terms of the viewers, you guys out there, which is really cool to have been able to do that. But then to come from Amsterdam back towards my place in Germany in Frankfurt has meant a blast down the de-restricted autobahns, getting to hear that naturally aspirated V12 absolutely screaming and wailing away as we drove up to 320 kilometers per hour. Well, you join me now just outside the city at a place called Grosser Feldberg, and the last time I was filming here, just over behind me, was over a year ago at the beginning of winter with the beast of the Black Hell, my AMG GTR, although I think it's fair to say the conditions that day were quite different to how they are now. We were surrounded by white and some very heavy snowfall, where this, with its 4-wheel drive system, would have been slightly more appropriate. Anyway, it was good times, but let's move on and I think rewind back a little bit to touch on my Ferrari history. My first Ferrari, the FF. Now, the early squad amongst you guys might remember 3.5 years ago when I collected that car, a bit of a surprise on the channel. Well, at the time the channel had around 500,000 subscribers, 500,000 subscribers or so, which is less than a third of what it is now. The car was in the garage for 2.25 years. We did about 20,000 miles, many adventures, memories, friends driving it, seeing so many of you around Europe along the way, until I sold it at the beginning of last year, at which point the channel had just over 1.1 million subscribers. The count is now at 1.7, which by my calculations means over a third of you guys weren't actually here with us for those adventures, but hopefully you are going to be for the adventures ahead with the GTC4Lusso. So I called the car earlier beautiful, and in today's sunshine I think that is very much the case. The spec is quite similar to my previous FF. The paint colour is Ferrari's traditional, historic, iconic paint colour, Tour de France blue. It's available across the range on all sorts of different models, and I think it suits the shape of this car very well. Talking of which, the GTC4Lusso, like the FF before it, is quite a Marmite car, and a lot of that comes down to this, to the hatchback. It's a 3-door hatchback, a shooting brake style of car, still with a front mid-engined V12 in this case, but also available with the twin-turbo V8. But that makes it quite a different proposition. You have the Ferrari dynamics and driving characteristics and the engine sound, but you also have comfortable back seats and a spacious boot for your luggage, for your golf clubs, for touring. It's literally a grand tourer, and we'll talk more about that later. It's quite a lot more of a GT actually than the FF was. Now, I, clearly, given the car is in my garage following the FF, am a very big fan of this car, of the shape of it, of the looks of it, and when you see it on the move, the way the rear squats down just looks immense. But let's talk a bit about the spec of the car. So we'll start, I guess, around the front of it. This car is loaded with just about everything. The blue paintwork, slightly different in colour to my FF. The FF was Le Mans blue, slightly darker overall, but I bought the car used, it had a couple of thousand miles on it, and the spec is so good for me that I just had to have it like this. It's actually wearing the same number plate that I had on my FF, the Xiaomi plate, SHMEE for Shmee, of course, the 10 as I had it on the FF, and underneath, if you can dream it, you can do it. A quote from Enzo Ferrari that I rather like to live by as well. You have things, for example, like the adaptive LED headlights that turn to point in the direction of the steering wheel. We've got a lot of carbon fibre on the exterior, the front splitter you'll spot, the side gills, the side skirts, just about every option that you could have from that front or that point of view. The design itself is actually a bit different from the FF, which had additional openings around the side for airflow, whereas this has the single much larger grille, more in line, I guess, with Ferrari's latest round of styling and design. As we come around the side of the car, like the FF, we've got the dual tone diamond cut wheels. I really like the 5 twin spoke finish, particularly with the Rosso Corsa red brake calipers, and as standard on all Ferraris, the carbon ceramic brakes too. Then behind that, you've got the Scuderia shields, pretty much compulsory on all Ferraris to have the yellow shields on the side fenders, beneath which the carbon fibre gills. Now, not all that many Lussos actually have those spec'd, but for me it really breaks up the colour very well, and you can just about spot that the car also has topaz paint protection film. The previous owner had it completely covered, the entire body from new, so the paintwork underneath is perfect. We've got the carbon fibre side skirts. It's a 19-inch wheel at the front, a 20-inch wheel at the rear, wearing the Pirelli P0s. I'll probably pop some winter tyres on it when we get round towards next winter as well. One thing you can't actually spec is a carbon fibre rear diffuser, so it's almost a black plastic, a bit like on the FF as well. It would be one very big carbon piece, no doubt very expensive and very vulnerable as well should anything happen. This car has the sports exhaust tips as opposed to the standard ones, but it is one fixed exhaust on the V12. And another option I really like is this. The tricolore, the Italian flag, that little badge on the boot lip is such a nice touch. And then you see the rear of the car, and this is one of my favourite angles of the GTC4Lusso. Low, but incredibly wide. So above the tail lights, you have this line that runs the full width, just accentuating quite how wide it is. And matched also down above the diffuser, where the tailpipes themselves also match with the tail lights. The design of the rear, I think, is absolutely fantastic. And just look at the width of those arches, how wide they are over the top of the rear wheels. A very, very cool piece of design for the back of this. And one other option that we have on this car is to do with this section here. So we have the particularly fantastic and absolutely ginormous panoramic glass roof. You'll see that from the inside in a moment. It's tinted, of course, as is the rear hatch window. And what that means basically is that normally this would be body colour and kind of break the flow. By having it painted Nero, the black paint there, it goes and swoops underneath the boot lid spoiler that you have here. You can see straight through the underside, and I think it just looks a bit better having the spoiler floating over the top. Now I'm going to show you inside the boot very shortly. We'll also check out under the bonnet inside the engine bay, but let's first just unlock it and have a quick glance at the interior. So I have here the key for the car. It's now a keyless system as opposed to the traditional turn key that you had with Ferraris, and there's a pouch inside the car to put this. Of course, it's painted in Rosso Corsa with the Ferrari badge on one side and the pop-out key at the end as well for manual access if required. On the other side, you have a series of buttons: unlock, lock, the button for the powerfold tailgate, and also to turn on the headlights should you wish. As with all Ferraris, when you press unlock, you get that double beep to signify. Lock it, you just get a single longer beep. So let's unlock that. I'll pop it back in my pocket. It's not keyless in the sense of just walking to the car and being able to unlock it, only in terms of actually starting the car with the button on the steering wheel. But let's take a look then inside here. It's a very different specification to what I had on the FF. That was cream, a very light colour. This is much darker. It's a Nero base, black leather with blue accents. So you can see those around the seats and some of the inserts. But again, a very high specification. The carbon fibre LED driver zone, the carbon panels around the controls in the centre, and I'm going to come in and show you all of the electronics, the displays, the passenger display right over there too. But just have a look at this. If I fold the seat forward for a second, have a look up at that roof. It is basically the entire roof panel, just with a few small kind of roof rails, and gives you the most amazing view on a lovely day like today, especially if you're sat in the back, where you can see the fairly comfortable seats actually back there. They're kind of like bucket seats in the rear. So let me just fold this back. Let's have a look under the bonnet. So under the steering column in the centre, you have the red catch here. Give that a pull, single pull, and it releases the bonnet. we'll come round. Of course, it's a huge bonnet. To position that engine mid-front engine, just behind the front axle, and of course also the four-wheel drive system, you basically have this one massive panel. A bit of a challenge when it comes to PPF with some new film to be that large. Then around here, just off to the right-hand side, is the catch to unleash it, and then have a look at that. An absolute work of art. The 6.3 litre naturally aspirated V12 that in this car makes 690 horsepower and 697 newton meters of torque. That is absolutely ridiculous for basically a family car that can take 4 people with some luggage in the back as well. And in traditional Ferrari style, it looks fantastic. The red engine cover, 12-cylinder layout in the centre, just a work of art, also with the plaque there for the chassis number. So you've got the 4RM system, Ferrari's pretty clever four-wheel drive system in this. It works four-wheel drive in first, second, third and fourth gear, then it goes into rear-wheel drive in 5th, 6th and 7th. So you have the 2 different characteristics depending how exactly you're driving it. That's controlled through the 7-speed dual clutch, a very trick and clever system that I am nowhere near understanding. So let's just close this down and go and take a better look at the interior, what it's like to be in the GTC4Lusso in terms of the screens, the displays, the electronics and the functionality that you have in here. So we'll start with the seats, electric memory seats. They're the Nero leather with the blue inserts that you can see all around them, up through the backrest as well. We also have the blue embroidery for the cavallino, the prancing horse there on the headrest, and the blue stitching as well. When you pull this to lean the seat forward, it's powered, it moves forward on its own accord, and likewise when you return it, it will head on back. Down at the side here, you can see the lumbar controls, the electric seat controls, and your seat heating button as well, which brings up a display on the central screen. The memory functionality is here on the door. Your 3 memory seat buttons, you press and hold them for 3 seconds to save, or you press once to return it back to that position. Behind those, you have the button here for the power-fold tailgate, also the button to open the fuel filler cap, a storage bucket underneath with some decent space. At the front, you have the mirror controls. When you turn that down to the bottom, if the car was powered, the mirrors would then fold, otherwise, of course, to the left or right to adjust. A carbon fibre grab handle, and the JBL upgraded sound system as well. But let's go ahead then and take a step inside, and the first thing that greets you is that. The large central yellow rev counter. Now it's an option to have it in yellow, you can have a few different colours, but you can see it goes all the way up here to 8,250 RPM, and it sounds oh so good when you get there. So the rev counter is flanked on either side by 2 digital displays. It can be changed what's showing on each one of those. On the steering wheel, you have a lot of the controls for driving. You don't need to take your hands off the wheel, but we'll go through each of those buttons. And then up the top, inside this carbon fibre piece, you have some lovely shift lights too. Over towards the centre, a 10.25 inch screen with Apple CarPlay. It doesn't have Android Auto, and I'm an Android user, so slightly disappointed about that. This is a diffuse panel which opens up for the climate control. You have those settings down below, and there's also the 8-inch screen here for the passenger. Again, a touch screen that they can interact with and make some controls, including the music that's playing also over on that side. Lots of the lovely carbon fibre everywhere though, which is absolutely stunning. But to turn on the ignition, one press of the engine start stop button. Now, one thing that I find particularly annoying is about to happen. As soon as you've turned the car on, that happens. The music comes on every single time, you can't stop it. But also, you'll spot that it kind of feeds the seatbelt to the person. Mine hasn't come forward because the door is open, but if I just close this quickly, you will see now that in theory, there we go, it's going to catch the seatbelt and deliver it to me. I'm actually going to open the door quickly because it's boiling. That's a pull of that, and then you press and open it up. I think, given that we're sat here though, we should bring the engine into life. So, foot on the brake, I'm going to press the nice big red button here, but take a listen to this as we start up the Lusso. Now that's one of the things about this car. When it's a cold start, the car's been parked here, I've been taking some pictures, it actually starts with the valves closed. When the engine is warm, it starts with the valves open. You get a more throaty start up. But in any case, it's a relief to have some air conditioning blowing. It's actually gone up to 14 degrees quite quickly. It was 8 degrees when I started this video not all that long ago. So you can see I've swapped the dials over to kilometers per hour. It's alerting us that the door is open, but you can change what is on those screens. In the central screen itself, which naturally being a touchscreen and currently in the sun is quite awkward to see with a few fingerprints and the dust on it, but no different to any other car I would say. You can go to the menu. It's reasonably responsive. Radio, media, navigation, phone, comfort settings and car settings. If let's say we go into the navigation, of course I've just turned the car on, but you can see we're out in the countryside. A very big display, also repeated there, currently set up on the left hand side of the screen. You've just heard the cold start process finished. You can do a few things with this. You can pinch and move it around. The things that you'd expect to be able to do on such a device. Of course we've got digital radio. If we head back to home, which you can also do with the hard button just down there at the bottom, and then you can scroll using the left side, volume and audio on off using the right side. If we go into comfort, in here you can see, for example, some of the seats settings. This is what I was saying earlier with the seat heating. If you turn it on or off, you can then cycle through the different modes. You can kind of see how all of that works. Or you can press the physical button on the side of the seat, which I'm just going to do so you can see how that works, and it scrolls through the different modes as well and ultimately turns off. So if we go back to home once more, just to show you into some of the settings. I always love playing with this and going through so many of the different things that you control, but you more or less get the idea. Now if you go through the climate, that's all done on the right hand side. You can see just down there for the driver, on the other side for the passenger. And this little control panel actually is reversed. In a left hand drive car, you'd have it over here as opposed to on that side, which is kind of a cool thing that they do, but the screen is dead central, facing straight back, and you can see now also the diffuse panel has opened up. Just to quickly show you the passenger display, bringing that into life as well. You have a few different menus and things you can go through. For example, the performance display there, you see exactly what's happening. You can see just revving it up a little bit there. If we go back to the home menu, go into VDA, that's depending how the Manatino is set, it gives you the car's settings. Again, navigation will give you a compass and direction and the next things that are going to be happening, and of course into media, depending if you have your radio or an iPod or something plugged in as well over on that side. Now let's talk about the steering wheel. Indicators, you can either control them with your thumb or you can use your finger around the back. If you press firmly like I did just then, it stays on. If you give it a kind of half press, it turns it on for 3 clicks, as you just saw. Obviously the same over on the right hand side, you get 3 clicks out of it. The lights, you press it away from you to go main beam, that's back to normal, or you kind of blip it towards you to flash them. On the right hand side you have automatic wipers, so that would be wipers off, automatic 1, automatic 2, and quite a little bit of rubbish is falling on the car where I parked here, unsurprisingly out in the woods, and we don't really want that on automatic or necessarily running at the moment. Down here you have the Manatino, Ferrari's famous controller for the different driving modes. I'm not quite sure why the wipers are actually running there, but it's in sport at the moment. Comfort softens up the suspension, softens up the throttle response, softens up the driving experience. Wet, of course, for bad weather, and ice if you're driving in a sub-zero. I think controlling the 4-wheel drive system slightly more, or going all the way the other way, holding it to ESC off, and as you can see, ESC completely turned off there as a result. I'm going to pop it back into sport mode for the time being. When you're in sport mode, you can press the bumpy road button here to soften the suspension back towards the comfort level, although I think it's slightly firmer still than comfort would be. Grand Tourer, the name of the game with this. Now on the back of the steering wheel, you can see here there is a little jog dial which you can rotate and also press on this side for your volume and press to mute, on the other side to control the left-hand display. So this is something I find slightly unintuitive. That control panel does the right-hand display, but the button on the back of the steering wheel here does the left-hand display. So I'm just going to close the door. The button to open the window is just down here. One touch down for the driver's side. Here, if we press back, for example, we can get to the main screen. You have status, excuse my wire here for, I always have Waze up for the navigation. Not that the car system is bad, just because I like having Waze with its social media functionality and live traffic. The status here, you've got 4 different displays. Tire pressures will only come in when we start driving, battery, oil pressure, and then your temperature screen. All in there. We go back to home again, you can see the trip information here. So if I go to that display, you can see I went 320 kilometers per hour with the car, and I have driven it 782.3 kilometers since I picked it up from Bramley's. And then the third screen here, VDA shows you as per the passenger side, depending how you have the Manettino set up. So you can see the various different configuration controls and the modes that they go through. And then finally, a few settings. So screen display, swapping the displays around, you can do as well. Measurement units when you need to put the car between miles and kilometers, all of that good stuff basically. So we'll go back to status. I prefer to have it on that view where you get the large miles per hour, the small kilometers per hour down at the bottom. Here also you have the cruise control. So when you turn that on and off, basically that enables cruise control, or in this car I should say pit speed limiter. So just like driving through a pit lane, you have a pit limiter, so you turn it right to turn it on, you can press it to resume it, and you use the brake to actually cancel it. So that's slightly unintuitive if you're not used to how a Ferrari drives. And also down here you have the headlights, so on automatic, parking lights off, side lights, everything you'd imagine. That actually feels really good quality, that, which is nice. And also spot just here, that's the sensor if the key isn't detecting as well, to just hold it out at the back. So the left-hand display, what you actually do with the jog dial on the back is go down to get to that little menu, similarly to the right side, but with phone, media, you can bring up the speedo, and the last one is the navigation, of course. So you can't do too much with it. And then when you're in a screen, you can do a few other things. I'm just playing as I go. So when I bring up the speed on that side, it leaves that side. It's really strange, I'm not gonna lie. There are some slightly unintuitive things about those displays. Moving over though, you've got the cameras here. We've got cameras at the front and at the rear and just about everywhere that help basically with the view and seeing all around, so you can see different view options basically. I think you press it again. Yeah, there we go, that's straight out in front of us. This is an interesting one. How do you get out of that view? This is a quirk, for example. Pressing the button doesn't get rid of it. The right hand side, there we go, parking display. This is the button for the lift system, which slowly raises the suspension. You can hear it whirring away in the background. But I don't necessarily know you can get rid of that view without turning the engine off. The lift is still running, there we go, lift on. I'm gonna pop it back down actually. So I'm learning as I go with some of the quirks. The not so sad thing about that is it means I'm gonna turn it off and turn it back on again. But let's just wait for the lift to finish. As soon as that has finished, let's give it a press, and you can hear how it basically turns the car off, except almost immediately. Let's start it back up so you can see what the dashboard does. There we go, that was the slightly louder start that I was talking about, and just for a bit of fun. Sounds so good. Look at the shift lights as well. Amazing, amazing sound out of this car. Absolutely love it. Now just above those buttons you have the air conditioning vents. I wasn't a big fan of these when I first went out in the car. I mean, they're good in the sense of lots of airflow pointing directly at the driver and passenger, but I kind of feel these toggles to open and close them aren't necessarily the absolute best. You have the controls for that down here, so including the diffuse button. If you basically turn off the diffuse, that panel closes itself back away. But of course you also have auto recirculation, front window, rear window, and independent controls for the driver and passenger. Down here on the right side, reverse, auto for the gearbox. So auto is by default. If you pull a paddle, it will go into manual short term, press auto itself, and it will go manually permanently. The launch control button, where you would literally press that, foot on the brake, foot on the accelerator, let go of the brake and go. Very easy to use in a Ferrari. And just beneath this, the hazard warning lights as well. Now this area, another thing I wasn't the biggest fan of. Just open that up, you can see there's some storage space here, some cup holders. This flips over to kind of give you a second cup holder or a bit of space. I keep my garage fob down there. Tiny amounts of space really though, and then you close one side and the other side shuts with it. But it feels just a little bit flimsier. I think it's better than when the car was originally launched. I think they've actually improved it over time. And I'm just grabbing at the same time the key out of my pocket to show you where this goes. Positions right in there, which in theory it should stay in when you're driving, although if you brake hard I feel like it's going to come flying forwards, but I haven't experienced that yet. Window switches, driver is one touch, passenger is one touch down, but it's not one touch up. You have to pull it all the way up. Again, a strange thing. The armrest is magnetic. You can see how that opens and closes. A few bits of space in here and some USB ports for the Apple CarPlay, and also charging. There's a cigarette socket here as well on the back of the front edge. There's some decent space actually in there. Overall, it has to be said. Passenger side has exactly the same as the driver with the 3 memory seat controls. Glove box button here to open, drops down, document folder in here, but not a whole lot more space, it has to be said, there inside the glove box. So what else can I show you inside? I mean, we've pretty much gone through most of this system. You can turn it off should you prefer. Not necessarily sure you would kind of want that. Home again to turn it back on. It's good, it's high quality, good resolution, nice font and style overall, impressive system, especially compared to the FF. Massively, massively, massively improved. Now with the air conditioning still running and the driver's seat currently saved for M1, my position, I'm actually going to fold it forwards and take a step in towards the back of the car. So that just folds forwards, does its thing, slides on. You've got a pouch there in the back as well for things. If you still use maps, you can pop one in the back there, climb on in, and here, look at this view. Look at the view of the roof. Now these rear seats are actually positioned slightly inboard of the front seats and also slightly higher, which means you can look over the shoulder of the driver and passenger and you don't feel too claustrophobic in the back. They're also comfortable and supportive, and you have the same storage and space around here as well. Just a tiny bucket, but again with some USB ports, some cup holders just here, and air conditioning vents for the rear seat passengers as well. And I'm actually just going to fold the seat back so that you can see exactly how much room there is as well when it comes back. Nice grab handles, magnetic up there, plenty of room really. I mean, I'm what, 5'10", 5'11", and I can sit in the back here fine with enough headroom up above me as well, plenty of headroom. And not any real heat from the glass, which is intriguing me. It's not particularly warm in here despite having this ginormous glass panel, which is due to the reflective properties, the tinting of it as well. And yeah, it does a pretty good job. You can also back here open up this. You can see through to the rear. We'll get to the back in a moment in more detail, but it's a split rear section, of course, for folding down the different seats depending on the occupants and what you want to be doing. Back here you also get a little bit more noise from the exhaust, which is not something I'm complaining about. Being a 3-door, it isn't the easiest to get in and out, but it's not too impossible, to be completely honest, especially with the window down. Just lean out, let it do its thing. So let me just climb back in. Carbon fibre side step sills look really nice with the sunshine on them. Let's take a little listen to this quickly. We're in park, engine is warm, we're in sport mode, so that means I think it's time to give it a few blips. Yeah, that's pretty epic. The sound of this car is absolutely magnificent. Oh, okay then, let's shut this off and go and take a look at the boot. I'm just interrupting myself quickly to show you a couple of further things about the interior, starting overhead with the console that you have up here that has a few further controls, including the stop-start button. Now Ferrari have this as an option, HELI as they call it, H-E-L-E, high emotion, low emissions. If you have stop-start disabled with the light orange, that means the V12 is kept always running. If you press the button, stop and start is then turned on, and basically that means when you come to a standstill, as you start moving again, you'll get the noise of the V12 starting up, and of course it will be more efficient. If you keep that off, the interesting thing is that the car actually retains that in its memory the next time you turn it on. It's not always defaulted back to being enabled. Alongside that, you've got the lock button, the motion sensor for transport to disable that, and then back here, the reading lights as well. And like other areas of the car, it's just slightly more premium in the way the lights come on gradually, and you have independent drivers and passengers reading lights there too. Now the steering column, I didn't show this before, but it's actually got a motor back here, so you can move that around, adjust it nice and easily. And also the shift paddles, the carbon shift paddles are fixed to the steering column, as is always the case with Ferraris. They are lovely, lovely things as well to feel. With the central screen, you can actually split the view. So if you press here, you can bring up a separate view for whichever thing you would like. So you could bring up navigation or have your phone and basically have that dual view out of it as well. You can do a lot of things clearly between all of these different screens. In fact, we've got 4 screens, including the passenger display. So yeah, there are a couple more things about the interior. Now, if you're like me, you've only gone and forgotten the key in the central console, and it's quite a wide car, which means that's a big lean to get that back out. There are 3 ways to open the boot, or maybe I should say trunk as well for the American viewers out there. The first of those is the button on the driver's door card. The second is to press and hold the button that's on the key. And the third, unlike the FF, there is now a fixed button under here by the number plate, which makes life a lot easier, and also alongside that you have the trickle charger port just here. That's not for plugging it in terms of the powertrain, of course it's a naturally aspirated V12, although you can also have the GTC4Lusso T with the 3.9 litre twin turbocharged V8 as found in the likes of the Portofino and the F8 Tributo, but that's all to do with keeping the battery conditioned, so the starter motor is ready, the electronics are all good, security and tracker systems are kept with power going to them. There is something though I'd like to show you in the boot. Let's press the button then and open that up, where we are greeted by the latest addition to the Shmee 150 shop. We've launched a series of posters. So this is actually my old FF, shot by Sebastian T Photography in the hills above Monaco. That's one of many examples. You'll find a link to the shop down below if you'd like to see those in more detail. The boot in general though offers plenty of space. You can see how you have this step change though, and that's basically because this is the fuel tank. It's a 90 litre fuel tank, which even with this engine is good for a pretty long range, it has to be said. But what it means is that if you have a large suitcase, it's kind of awkward to fit it in, but basically it's designed for the fitted luggage, which in this lower front section you can basically place 2 of the trolley bag size luggage that you can take on an aeroplane. Then above those you can have 2 additional bags going in the direction of the car as well. So that's actually plenty of space, 4 people, a suitcase each, as well as a bit of room inside the car too. Now in the back, the car comes supplied with this lovely red badge GTC4Lusso, inside which is a red car cover, plus additional covers for each of the driver and passenger seat, and a cover for the steering wheel, which is really quite nice. It also has in there the trickle charger, which just plugs into the mains, has a charging box, and then plugs onto that socket on the very back too. Now what else you can do in here? Well, actually first, let me show you this. The personalised specifications of this car, and a very extensive list of options. I mean, just try and take a moment to read all of this. It's lots of carbon fibre, lots of technology, some bespoke things off the main menu, I suppose we could say, and basically an all-around lovely spec. But all modern Ferraris now have this plaque either in the front bonnet boot or here in the rear of the Grand Tourers with a front engine as well. Now you can take out this parcel shelf, you can see how that unlatches. You can also take out this parcel shelf, and you can fold the seats. So the 40-20-40 folding rear seats, you have these catches just above. You can give that a pull to unlatch it I should say, and then it just drops down forwards. And you can do the same on this side. Of course, if I had taken out the parcel shelf, that would have been a touch easier. And then you have a ginormous boot. And I took my FF to IKEA. I took it skiing. I did this plenty of times with a lot of luggage in the back. The practicality of a Ferrari like this is just nuts. It lets you take so much stuff with you. And like I said, if you do take these out, you can see how it opens up even more. So that's about as practical as a Ferrari has ever been, with even more space for the rear passengers in the back of the Lusso than the FF had as well. So you could take a bookcase at well over 300 kilometers per hour, or whatever other luggage you might see fit to take in the back of the GTC4Lusso. So don't forget, posters are in the shop, the link is below, but one press of this and the boot will close itself back down, gently closing when it gets down to the bottom and latching itself into place. What I think might be quite interesting to some of you is to talk about how the GTC4Lusso compares to the FF. So like I said, in my FF, over the 2 and a bit years, we did around 20,000 miles. Now admittedly, some of that was with friends driving while we were in convoy with multiple cars, but I had a pretty good feel for what that car was like. The Lusso I've driven a couple of times before now. Picking this car up was not the first time I had driven one, so I already had a bit of an understanding. But now after another 500 miles or so, I've started to get a better comparison between this and the predecessor. So the FF drove very much like, I would say, a twitchy Ferrari, pinpoint precise steering, very sensitive throttle and brake pedals, whereas this is much more kind of controlled back towards a Grand Tourer. It definitely has a wider breadth of abilities overall, but it's things like the valves. When you start the car, they stay closed. In first, second and third gear, basically they're closed in comfort mode, so it's a touch quieter. At the press launch, they pushed how much quieter the air conditioning was, which I think gave a sense for what the car was about. Basically, they said, right, let's make this a more usable car, less the extreme Ferrari, less like the 812 Superfast or the F12 Berlinetta before it. Another thing that it has is the rear wheel steering. That wasn't on the FF, so what that means basically is that it can corner kind of like it's on rails. It can just pull around spectacularly easily, so when you're driving it in sport mode, it completely comes alive. The shifts are insanely fast, the noise is absolutely mega with the valves open, and the steering feel and driving qualities are really good as well, whereas when you put it into comfort, it relaxes back and becomes much more of that Autobahn cruiser as I experienced. Although going onto the brakes from 300 plus, definitely you felt the weight of the car. The dry weight is 1,780 kilos. It's no lightweight, that's for sure. I think probably a touch lighter than the FF. So really what they've done from the FF is make it this Grand Tourer, more of a Grand Tourer. It's basically the same shape and same style, and you can tell it's the development. Ferrari often do this in pairs across a model's life cycle. They do a major update, but it's based very much on the similar thing, the 6.3 V12, this chassis, this setup. But it's softer when you want it in comfort. It's also a bit faster and a bit crazier when you want it in sport, thanks to the different electronics and systems that the car has as well. So it's a similar car, but it's also quite a different car in the way it does that. So a simple thing would be to either pull the valve or put a different exhaust on it, and then it will get massively louder. But as the sun is on the car, I do think it looks stunning, and I am so happy with this spec. I've seen a few people commenting on change the wheels to black or something. That's not going to happen. It's staying like this. Perhaps the wheels do look a bit small relative to the size of the car. You know, we're talking about a car that's 4 meters 90 or so in length, and the rear wheel definitely could fill that arch a tiny bit more, but this is how they configured it, and I don't really want to change it because I like the look of it an awful lot. The silver of the wheels matching with the silver of the exhaust tailpipes, the Ferrari badge worn on the rear boot lid as well, the whole look of the car, and I'm pretty happy with the interior. I thought I would have preferred a crema interior, but you do worry less having a darker interior about any spillages or stains or dirt or anything that might cause a mess down the line. So I think we've covered an awful lot about the Ferrari GTC4Lusso. I hope I've touched on literally everything to do with it and given you a full insight and induction tour to this car, the spec of mine in particular, and also the details in general about this model from Ferrari. One of my favourite cars, and a car that I definitely intend to do an awful lot with going forward. This car is going to feature as a bit of a support car almost on many trips over the coming months. I think it's going to have done quite a few thousand miles more literally within the next 2 months or so from now than it's already done. You've already had a few videos with the car itself, and then of course it's going to be joined, a few people have asked about this, in the garage by the G63 Amg. Now a few people have pointed out that the G63 from Amg and this are both four-wheel drive, practical, kind of sensible cars. Well, I guess they'll almost rotate a bit, which one is in England, which one is in Germany, and then maybe next winter, what would be really cool would almost be to do something like a winter rally with both cars together, with the team, with all the guys involved in Shmee 150. That would actually be awesome. So maybe I'll look into doing that next winter. But I can see a purpose for each car, different videos, different experiences, different manufacturers. But yes, I think I'm rambling on a little bit, but there we have it. That's the GTC4Lusso, the latest addition to the garage. There's lots more to come with it, but that's it for this time. Thank you very much, as always, for your support, guys. I appreciate it an awful lot, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheers!